Good morning. I'll say it again. If you're visiting with us today, we are glad you are here. Thank you for coming our way and spending some time with us. We pray you'll be encouraged through your time together with us today. Last week we began a new series of study. We're calling it Reclaiming Your Inner Peace. And last week we started off by looking at how we deal with failure. And because it happens to all of us. We looked at what failure does to us and how we can avoid the pitfalls that come from it and what it tends to do to us, how we feel about ourselves when we do fail. Okay, this week we're going to talk about something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about a mindset. We're going to be talking about an attitude, the way you think. And the attitude we're going to talk about this week is one called negativity. And I'm sure none of you have ever struggled with being negative, right? Never. Especially over the last couple of years. You've never been negative about anything. You haven't been negative about COVID. You haven't been negative about politics. You haven't been negative about the weather. You haven't been negative about church. You haven't been negative about the preacher especially. But you have been negative pretty much about anything, have you? Don't lie. I set you up right then and there. I expect every one of you said nope right down here on front when we're done. Listen, it's a tendency we all have, right? I mean, we have this propensity in us sometimes to get negative. But do you realize that the way you think about things can completely rob you of the inner peace that you have in your life? Not only can negativity rob your peace, it can literally make a complete mess of who you are. Negativity has been labeled in all kinds of various forms. Some people call it pessimism. Some people call it depression. And let me just stop here real quick, okay? A lot of people talk about people who are negative as they're depressed. They're depressing. I understand that. There is also a very real, clinically, physiologically diagnosed issue called depression that is treated. I'm not talking about that. I understand some people suffer from depression physiologically, and that's not what we're talking about. That's chemical imbalance that's dealt with. What I'm talking about are people who depress you because you hang around them too, right? Those kind of people who just always seem to be pulling everybody down. Anybody know that person? I mean, even the cartoon guys, we have, I know my daughter Catherine's going to get mad at me for putting Eeyore up here because she loves Eeyore. But to me, Eeyore is the microcosm of negativity because every time Eeyore speaks, it's always, okay, right? I mean, he's just, and then you got Grumpy Smurf and you got Grumpy Dwarf, and we even got emojis now that you can put on your phone that kind of tell you, this is just how grumpy I am. All right? But although those are cartoon characters, they emulate what's happening in real life. I mean, think about it really. How much fun is it to be around any one of these? Not much, is it? Matter of fact, if you know somebody's kind of like that, you have a tendency to kind of what? Avoid them, right? Go the other way. People like this, and don't get me wrong, I'm trying not to be critical. I'm trying to say this in the most gentle, loving way that I can, okay? But sometimes when negativity gets a hold of us, and it gets a hold of me, all right? Let me just tell you, it gets a hold of me. I can get there. But when it does, I turn into an emotional vampire that will literally suck the life out of anybody that gets close. I'm just being honest. That's what negativity does. It feeds and it sucks the life out of us. Now, with all this talk, what does it mean to be negative? It means you act negatively, okay? That's one of those simple things Eric was talking about today, right? They're not happy, they're not cheerful, they're not happy, they're negative, they're gloomy, they're dark, they're depressing. Something is always wrong, okay? Now, I'll be the first to admit also, self-included, we all have bad days. Do we not? I mean, we all have bad days. We all have bad periods. Some of us have bad weeks. We may even have bad months. We may even have bad years. 2019, COVID, 20, that was a bad year. right? We have those times in our life, but that's not what I'm really talking about. I'm talking about if that kind of attitude is who you are most of the time. You live your life in that frame of mind most of the time. I got something for you today, all right? But here's the thing. Since we're all prone to depression, we're all prone to negativity, especially in the world and culture we live in today, the question we're going to seek to answer is not how to avoid a negative attitude, because it's going to happen. It's just like failure. It's going to happen. There's things that are going to happen in our lives. And don't get me wrong. I'm not asking you to have that mind when you walk out the door in the front morning, to go to work and it's pouring down rain and you want to just run to your car and get in and get to work and you look out and you got a flat tire. I'm not asking you to go, oh, goody. It's not what I'm saying. I mean, there are certain things in life that, we're going to respond negatively to. And I'm not, I have my head in the clouds so high to believe that's not the case. Sometimes people treat you like dirt. Sometimes people treat you badly. Sometimes people walk all over you. And I'm not saying for you to go, oh, that's okay. I don't want you to be a doormat either, okay? But recognize it's going to happen. But here's the question I seek to answer today. What do we do, or what do I do when negativity and depression come? When it starts to set in as a mindset, when it starts affecting who I am. This morning we're going to peer into the life of the prophet Elijah. If you got your Bibles, be turned over to 1 Kings chapter 18. What I love about this account in Elijah's life is Elijah is a godly, he is a kingdom-minded, he is God-honoring, he's a God-fearing person, and yet he faced a period of time in his life that was not good, and it caused his attitude to become very negative. It got the best of him, okay? We're going to start in 1 Kings 18, but let me take just a minute to set the context for our text today. The book of 1 Kings is a kind of a record of the kings of Israel and Judah. And by the time we get to chapter 18, Israel has been on kind of a roller coaster ride. They'd have a really good king, and then they'd have a really bad king. And then they'd climb back up, we got a good king again, and then we got a bad king again. I mean, that's kind of Israel's history. They're up and down and up and down. And when we get to chapter 18 of 1 Kings, we're not up here, we're down here. We got a bad king. And the king that is there at this time is a guy by the name of Ahab. And Ahab was a bad guy. As a matter of fact, so bad, he took the children of Israel, the nation of Israel, and diverted their attention and worship away from Yahweh to the false god of Baal. Okay? Now, during this period of time, God would send prophets or messengers, okay, that would take God's message to the king or to the nation of Israel and say, hey, here's what's going on. Here's how you need to change. Elijah's one of those guys. Elijah's a messenger of God, a prophet of God, and he's going to go to Israel. He's going to go to Ahab and say, hey, what you're doing is not right. Okay? And he gets to the point, nobody's listening to him. He's trying to turn the nation back to God, and nobody's paying attention. Ever been there? Yeah, we all have. Okay? And down in verse 21, he's finally had enough. And Elijah came near to all the people. He gets Israel out there and he's come near to all the people. And he says, how long, I love his phrase here. How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. Basically, Elijah throws down this gauntlet and said, okay, Israel, it's time to put up or shut up. All right? You're kind of limping back and forth between God and between Baal. And this week it's God and this week it's Baal. And Elijah's like, make up your mind. Make up your mind. The text goes on to say that the people didn't give him an answer. They didn't respond. So Elijah takes it up a notch. Okay? He takes it up a notch and he calls all the prophets of Baal together and he says, this is basically the showdown at the OK Corral. We're going to meet out in the street. We're going to draw. We're going to see who's fastest. All right? But Elijah doesn't have a pistol. Haven't been invented yet. Okay? So what he does is he tells the prophets of Baal, you guys build yourself an altar. You get a bull and you prepare it. That means to cut it up and kill it and put it on You don't get that in VBS part, okay? But anyway, put it up there on the altar, cut this thing up and put it up there, but don't light the fire. And what we're going to do, you're going to pray to Baal, and Baal's going to show just how powerful he is by lighting the fire that's going to burn up the offering. And so the prophets of Baal, yeah, it's a great idea. We got this. And they build their offer, they prepare their offering, they put it on there, and man, they're doing their thing, and they're praying, and nothing happens. And they start dancing around, which I hope God has all this on DVD. I mean, this is one of those scenes I want to see. 450 prophets dancing around an altar. I mean, I just kind of want to see that, right? And they start dancing around, and they're praying, Baal, light the fire. Baal, they're singing our song, right? Light the fire. That's what they're singing. That's where it came from. No, it didn't. Okay? They're begging him, light the fire, Baal. Light it. Light it. That doesn't work. So they start cutting themselves, which I never understood. But whatever. They start cutting. Maybe they think Baal needs them to show just how serious they are about it. And the funny thing about this, it's not really funny. Elijah is watching all of this go on, right? And I can see him. He's leaned up against a tree over here with his legs crossed like this, and he's looking at these prophets dancing around. And every once in a while, he'll throw out, maybe he's hard of hearing. Maybe you need to pray a little louder. And nothing happens. A little bit later, maybe he went on vacation and he just hadn't got back yet. And he even says, maybe he had to go to the bathroom. You think go read verse 27. He says all of this. Okay? He does. And the amazing thing, down about verse 29, our author says this, no one listened. Meaning, no God, no Baal. No one answered. No one paid attention. And then, now it's Elijah's turn. He makes his altar. He gets his bull ready, which means he killed it, and puts it on the altar. And he gets it all ready, and then he takes it a step further. He gets these 12 jars of water, these huge jars of water, and he dumps all this water on top of the altar, on top of the wood, on top of the ground, digs a trench around it, fills that with water. I mean, this place is soaked. And the reason why is everybody would know that there was no way any human being could light that thing. It was so wet, so drenched. It was not possible for any person, any human, to make that light the way it was. And then, this is where it gets cool. Elijah prays this simple prayer. O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. And you know what? God answers. And fire comes from heaven, and it consumes the offering, it consumes the wood, it consumes the altar, it dries up the water that's on the ground. And Israel, man, when they heard it or saw it in verse 39, they said, when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, the Lord, He is God. He is God. The Lord, He is God. Man, what Elijah did worked. He's just turned all of the nation now back to seeing God for who He is and worshiping Him. What an awesome experience, right? Now, I will also say this is where the VBS story ends, because the very next thing that happens is Elijah and Israel chase the prophets of Baal down to the creek, and they kill them all 450 of them. Again, you don't get, that doesn't work out too well on a flannel graph, okay? But nonetheless, they do that. Right? And you think, when you look at this whole picture, you think everything's going good for Elijah. He's just turned everybody's heart back to God. He's defeated the prophets of Baal. He's on top of the Mount Carmel doing it. Man, this is the awesome mountaintop experience. And I thought this was about negativity. Yeah. Watch what happens immediately next. Chapter 19, starting in verse 1. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. And he was afraid, and he arose and he ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he asked the Lord that he might die, saying, "It's enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I'm no better than my fathers." And he lay down and slept under a broom tree. And behold, an angel touched him and said to him, "Arise and eat." And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and he drank, and he lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came a second time and touched him and said, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." And he arose and ate and drank and went into the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. There he came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And he said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left. And they seek my life to take it away." Man, do you hear the negativity that's pouring out of this guy right after coming off of this massive mountaintop experience? What can we learn from this? What caused him to get to that point? Okay, the first thing I want to show is this, okay? First thing. It's a focus on feelings rather than facts, okay? A focus on feelings rather than facts. You know, Eric talked this morning about how our feelings can be very complex. That's true, they can be. They can be. Ahab goes running back to his wife Jezebel and cries to her about what mean old Elijah had just done to him. "Honey, he made me look bad in front of all of Israel. He killed all of my Baal prophet friends, and now I don't know what I'm going to do." And that gets the wife ticked off. And what does she do? Takes matters into her own hands. "Well, if you're not going to stand up to him, I am." And she sends a messenger to tell Elijah, "I'm coming after you." Right? And the text says, guess what? Elijah was afraid. That's an emotion. That's a feeling. He was afraid, and he ran for his life. So he runs scared into the wilderness by himself because there he feels safer. Those are his feelings. But what are the facts? What are the facts? Fact number one, I don't believe Jezebel ever intended to kill Elijah. I think it was an empty threat. And here's why. Number one, if you want to kill somebody, you don't send a messenger, you send an assassin. That's what they did back then. You don't warn the guy, "Hey, I'm going to kill you tomorrow." You just go kill him. I'm not giving you advice on how to do that, by the way. I'm just saying. All right, don't take that the wrong way. But further, if this lady's smart at all, the last thing she wants to do right now is to give Israel a martyr because they have just turned back to God. And the worst thing she could do politically for her husband would be to create a martyr in Elijah. And the last thing, if she's smart at all, she knows what happened to Elijah on Mount Carmel. She knows what Elijah's God did to that sacrifice. She knows what Israel's God has done before. And there's no way Jezebel wants to go toe-to-toe with the Yahweh that Elijah worships. That's probably the fact of the matter. The second fact that Elijah forgot is the fact that God is powerful. He's just witnessed this on Mount Carmel. He's just prayed and seen fire come down from heaven at his request and consume this altar. Right? That's the fact of the matter. God's got his back. You know, Dave Ramsey used to do a little experiment in some of his seminars, just kind of to prove this point between feelings and facts. He'd get 5 or 6 people up in front of an audience, and he would put a blindfold on them, and then he'd make them turn around a couple of times, and then he would ask them, "Okay, settle for a minute." He says, "Now trust your feeling here. Point north." Okay? Based on how you feel, which direction do you think is north? How many people do you think we're all pointing in the same direction. Usually they were all going all different directions. Why? Because they were guided by their feelings. I feel like it's that way. I could wake up and go, I feel like that's north. But it's not, is it? Is it? No, that's south, right? Yeah, that is north. Yeah. Okay? But you see, that's the problem sometimes we get. We allow our feelings to dictate our response or our attitude. But here's the thing. Feelings are given to us. Emotions are given to us by God. And they're needed for us to be healthy. But we have to understand what purpose it was that God gave them to us for. Emotions for us, if I can get it there. I'm going to try it once. They're not meant to guide our thinking, but rather to express what we're thinking. We say that again. Emotions are not meant to guide our thinking, but rather to express what we're thinking. This is the problem in our culture today. This is a problem in our world today. Everything in our world today is driven by how we feel, not what we know. We have people running all over the place. Well, I said it last week. I feel like I want to be a turtle today. But what do you know? You're not a turtle. Doesn't matter how you feel. What do you know? And we're guided. Our world is, well, I don't feel like that's wrong. I don't feel like that's a sin. I don't feel like God would care if I do this. You know what? Again, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. What do you know about it? And what you can know about it, you find in here, not in your feelings. Elijah's problem right off the bat was he didn't check what he knew with how he felt. Was it normal for him to be frightened? Sure, a little bit, but he should have backed up that feeling with a study of the facts. Because here's the thing, if we end up allowing our feelings to dictate how we live our lives, we end up looking like this. You see, the one thing in this cartoon that's not moving? His tail. This is the tail wagging the dog. When you allow your feelings to dictate how you live your life, you're allowing the tail to wag the dog instead of the other way around. Okay? That's what Elijah's doing. Don't allow your emotions to control how you think. If you're feeling negatively, back off and examine the facts. What facts do you know? The second thing we get to, we compare ourselves with others. We all do this. We all do this. And nothing will sour your attitude more quickly than comparing yourself to somebody else. Elijah makes this complaint to God in verse 4. He said, "It's enough. Now, Lord, take away my life, for I'm no better than my fathers." What's he saying? I'm comparing myself to the prophets of old, and I ain't no better than them. I'm terrible. So why do we compare? We may be unhappy. We may be dissatisfied with something about ourselves or our lives. Whether it's the way I look, oh, I wish I could look like him. I wish I could look like her. Our job, oh, I wish I made his kind of money. I wish I had her job. Our talents, I wish I could, you fill in the blank. I wish I could do that like so-and-so does. Or acceptance, I wish everybody would like me like they like so-and-so. Church, let me tell you something. Until you are content with the person God created you to be, and with the blessings God has given you personally in life, you will always be comparing yourself to others. So how do you fight that temptation to compare, right? Take time, and I want you to do this. Take time to actually write down how blessed you are. Write down your blessings. Write it down on a piece of paper and keep it with you all the time. And each time you feel unhappy or you feel unloved or you feel like things are not going your way, you take out that list and you look at it and you say, God's blessed me here. He's blessed me here. He's blessed me here. He's blessed me here. And pretty soon you'll realize something. You are blessed. And let me tell you something else. If the only thing you can write on your paper is God sent his son to die for my sins, then you are still blessed. But if you're here today, sitting in this nice air-conditioned place on these nice padded seats, and you drove here in a vehicle that even runs, you are more blessed than probably 80% of the people in the world. Okay? We're blessed people. Don't forget about that. Another thing we regularly do, you'll soon learn, there's an inherent problem when comparing yourself to others, and it's this. We usually compare our weaknesses to their strengths. We know where we're wrong. We look at how badly we are at this, and we look at somebody else who's really good at it, and we make that comparison, and you shouldn't. You shouldn't. Because let me tell you something about those very same people. They have weaknesses too. And you have strengths in other areas. But we compare. Man, we need to get this into our minds. Each one of us, we are a special masterpiece designed as we are by God Himself, and God does not make mistakes. He doesn't make mistakes. You are perfect as God created you to be, just as you are. Just as He made you. The third problem, we falsely blame ourselves. You ever done that? Oh, it's all my fault. Listen to what He says in verse 10. I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. Now, whose job was it to take God's message to Israel? Elijah's. And here he's saying, look, you gave me the message to take to them, and here's the result. Here's the result. He's blaming himself for not failing, or for failing to change the nation, and he took it personally. But what he has to remember is that he can't make the choice of the people. And what we need to remember is we can't make other people's choices for them either. We can't. Elijah's people had chosen, albeit a bad choice. It was still their choice. Bottom line, Elijah did what God asked him to do. And at the end of the day, let me tell you something right here. At the end of the day, if you walk into your bedroom and you lay down in your bed and you close your eyes and you say this, God, I have tried today to do everything you've asked me to do. If you can lay down and say that, then go to sleep with peace in your heart. You cannot control how people will respond. You cannot control people. I know a lot of heartbroken parents who have kids who are grown and they're not living the way they wish they would, and they falsely blame themselves for everything wrong in their kids' lives. Now, I'm not saying parents don't have a part to play in raising and shaping their kids, but the reality is you can do everything right as a parent, and your kids can still make choices you know are wrong. You can't control that. Any more than you can control how people in here will respond. And if you can't control how people in the Lord's church are going to respond, what makes us think we can in any way, shape, or form control how the world's going to respond? We have a hard enough time sometimes dealing with each other. But the only person you can control is you. Is you. The last mistake he makes, he exaggerates the negative. Okay? Verse 10. I'm only one left, and they seek to take my life and take it away. One word. Perspective, Elijah. He just led the people in one of the largest national repentative acts on Mount Carmel ever. They all come back to God after seeing what he does, right? He's just defeated 450 prophets of God. Just saw God answer his prayer by making it rain. You'll have to read that at the bottom of 18. And don't miss this. At the end of 18, after Elijah prays to God and makes it rain, look at verse 46. I'm going to take you back to 18 real quick. Look at this. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garment and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Real quick context, after this scene on Mount Carmel, it hasn't rained. Elijah prays for rain. Prays again, little cloud way out there. All of a sudden that little cloud bursts up, kind of like here in the Gulf. See one little bitty cloud out there, and before long it turns into a great, anyway, it rains. It rains because Elijah's been praying for it to rain. It says he gathers up his garment. Now, he's wearing a robe. What that means is he probably reaches down in between. He pulls his robe up, like you ladies hitch up your dress. You know, he's got his dress, and he pulls it up. And he says he ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. And we read over that and we keep going straight into chapter 19. Okay? The very first words of that verse are what? The hand of the Lord was on Elijah. Let me tell you something. I Google mapped it. It's 31 miles between Mount Carmel and the entrance to Jezreel. And it says Elijah did what? He ran in front of Ahab's chariot 31 miles. And the hand of the Lord was upon Elijah. You think so? You think so? This guy just completed a marathon and decided, oh, I'll just throw in another 10K. Right? And then he says, I'm the only one left. Really? Perspective. Verse 18 of chapter 19, God looks at him and says, sorry, dude, no, you're not the only one. As a matter of fact, there's 7,000. And there's big difference between 1 and 7,000 of you left. Actually, 6,999 for those of you that are slow in math. Okay? There's a big difference. You're not the only one. Usually things are never as bad as we tend to exaggerate them to be. Don't get me wrong, sometimes they are, but usually we have that tendency. If you catch yourself using words like everyone, or all the time, or never, or always, or no one, you might be exaggerating a bit. Okay? Just maybe. And it's at that point we need to get perspective, we need to focus on the facts and gain a better perspective. Real quick. 4 things he did wrong. Focused on feelings rather than facts. He compared himself with others. He falsely blamed himself, and then he exaggerated the negative. Now, I want to flip you to the positive and give you 3 things how to avoid these 4 mistakes. And the first is simply this: take care of your physical needs. This is important when you're dealing with negativity. Look at what he says in verse 5 through 7. We've already read it. I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel, have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword, and I'm the only one left, and they are here to take it. I got to back up one. There we go. Sorry, read you the wrong one. 5 to 7. He lay down and slept under a broom tree. Okay? Catch this. He lays down, he goes to sleep. An angel comes and touches him and wakes him up and feeds him. And then after he feeds him, he does what? He goes back to sleep again. Okay? Did you notice? First he sleeps, then he eats, then he drinks, then he sleeps. Negativity comes about more often when you're tired and you're physically depleted. How many of your kids ever get hangry? How many of you ever get hangry? You know what I'm talking about. You get angry when you get hungry, right? They call it, we didn't have that word when I was little. I wish we did. I'd have used it all the time. Mom, I'm hangry. Right? What are we saying? We're saying our lack of sustenance has made us feel angry, right? It's an amazing, the connection between our physical abilities and our physical rest. You know, I tell you what, Dana and I do this thing, and it is so rejuvenating for me. I know I apologize to my small group because I didn't invite you the last time we did this, but after the last one of the small groups, we jumped in the car, we drove to the beach, we sat out our lawn chairs, and we just sit. And we watch the waves come in. And it's therapeutic. How many of you agree? Yeah, I mean, it is. It is. There's just something about it. Why? I don't know. It's God's way of de-stressing me, of de-stressing my mind, of reminding me who's in control, of reminding me how much He loves. I mean, it's just a place to go. And maybe you need that. Maybe you need rest. Maybe you need nourishment. I'm going to tell you something. I don't want to preach on this too long, but some of y'all need to check your diet. Okay? Just saying, what you eat will determine how you feel physically. How you feel physically will determine how you think mentally. And if all that's out of whack, guess what? You're going to fall into negativity all the time. Okay? The second thing, take care of your physical needs. Give your frustrations to God. We've already read verse 10. All right? This is where Elijah comes and he said, listen, this is all the stuff I've done for you, God. I've tried, but Israel's still gone this way. Here's the thing. Right or wrong, in the understanding of his situation, Elijah still goes to God with his problem. Church, we need to do the same. God allows Elijah to tell him his frustrations, and he's allowed to vent on him as well. And I really don't believe most of us have a problem with taking our issues to God. What we have is a problem with leaving our issues with God. We take it to God, we explain it, and then we don't get immediate satisfaction, and 5 minutes later, we're right back before God. God, I don't think you quite understood me the last time. Let me tell you again. And then the next day, God, you must have been really busy, and I know you didn't get my call, and you haven't had time to answer, but let me throw it to you again. You know what? Give it to God and trust that God can deal with it. He's got big shoulders. He dealt with it for Elijah, okay? Leave your problems, leave your frustrations, leave your hurts at the feet of Jesus, and don't pick them up again. Trust that God will deal with it and take care of it. Give them to God and leave them with God. Thirdly, lastly, get a renewed right perspective of God. My favorite two verses of this entire passage, verse 11, verse 12. Elijah's in the cave. God's asked him, what are you doing here? And he said, go out. This is God talking now in verse 11. Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And there was God. What Elijah needed was a fresh awareness and perspective of God himself, and God showed up in a big way. I have no doubt that Elijah viewed God differently from that day on. I have no doubt that many of us also need a renewed right perspective of God. Sometimes our wonder, sometimes our awe, sometimes our reverence for God and who He is and how powerful He is and how much He loves us. Sometimes that gets a little dingy. It gets a little dull. Maybe we even forget it altogether just by going through the motions. We need to get a new and renewed perspective of just how almighty our almighty God is. And we need to depend upon that. Now, what I do find interesting in Elijah's case is that God didn't show up in the windstorm, which we'd expect God to be in. Power, wind. He doesn't show up in the earthquake like what happened on Sinai with rocks and rumblings and all that. He didn't show up like that. Not in the fire that consumed on Mount Carmel even, but in a gentle whisper. You know, to look for God in only the spectacular, in only the church camp experience, in only the exposure experience, in only the weekend retreat experience or whatever, to relegate the awesomeness of God to these little experiences, you'll miss God completely. He's often found in the quiet reflection of His Word. He's often found in the stillness of prayer. Again, He's found in the repetitive motion of the ocean and in nature. He's found in the whisper of a friend's love and affection. But in order to hear it, you have to be still and you have to listen. If you're feeling negative, take a step back from the noise and activity and chaos of this world. And let me tell you something about this world. It is noisy. There's something coming in all the time. And sometimes we bring it on ourselves. We turn the radios on, we turn the TVs on, we got our phones on. It's just noise all the time. You can't hear a gentle whisper in the middle of noise. This morning, I got two questions for you, and the lesson's yours. Which of Elijah's mistakes do you make most often? And which remedy do you need most in your life? I'll let you think about those. Okay? But here's what I do know. God wants you to be at peace. He wants your soul to be at peace. He wants you to be positive because of the blessings He showered upon you, because He desires a relationship with you. But understand this, and the lesson, I promise, is yours. For those of you that walk around and think, well, this is how God made me. God, just made me a negative person. I'm just kind of that way. Understand this. God created you to exist with him eternally in heaven. And my daughter's going to get mad, but God didn't create a bunch of Eeyores to end up in heaven. I mean, I'm sure Eeyore's a great guy. Catherine, if you're listening, okay? But when we get to heaven, it's like, hey, what do you think about it? Oh, it's okay. Have you met Jesus yet? Yeah, I did. I was fourth in line. I wanted to be third in line. It took me an eternity to move up one spot. Right? I mean, sometimes but here's the thing, church. This is who we're going to spend heaven with, right? I mean, look up and down these rows. This is who we're going to spend heaven with. Don't be looking at them like, oh no, it's them again, and I've got to spend an eternity with them. Hopefully heaven's big. I can go to my side and they can stay on their side, right? I mean, I'm just being real. That's how we feel sometimes, but that's not how God created us to feel. And that's not how he wants us to feel. So this morning, if you need, maybe you need the prayers of this church to help get the negativity out of your life. We could all pray that prayer for all of us. Anybody not need that prayer prayed for them this morning? Right? We all do, okay? But just think how great God is and how much he's blessed your life. And when that negativity comes in, look at the facts. Get a new perspective. See God for who he is. Take your frustration to him and let him deal with it. If we can help you with anything, we invite you to come. Let us know as we stand and sing.